we thought we would, we've heard a kind of an update on the global trade flows, as well as an insight into, three important countries for tropical production. And we thought we'd now look with a panel discussion with a few different speakers about, well, what do they see as an outlook for 2021, about the future of the tropical timber market, and whether some of the other drivers which are happening in the world, particularly around climate talks, green stimulus, green bonds, and so on, will have a positive impact on our sector and certainly on forests. So I'd like to, if I can, if the technology will allow, to bring in some of the other speakers that we've got, starting with our panelist, Mark Hogg from Mere Plantations. If we can take him off mute. George White from the Global Timber Forum, and Michael Rawlinson QC. If we can take everyone in, there we are. And I thought, as just to end today's session, we would have a quick discussion about different business models that could work, new investments that are going on. And Mark, I'm going to start with you. We'd asked you to join as Mere Plantations. Certainly it's a new member to the Timber Trade Federation, but also a relatively new young business, which has started in Ghana. And could you just give us an update on your business model and what your business is doing and your investments into this sphere?
Sure, absolutely. Thanks for the opportunity to do it, David. I think Mere Plantations, we started 13 years ago. We've been looking to reforest and re-afforest degraded forest land in Ghana. We chose Ghana simply because of the climate, the ability to grow here, and a massively supportive forestry commission with incredible technical knowledge. And it's all come together. We're 10 years in, and we're just beginning our first harvest now of tropical teak.
And where are those logs going? If you're harvesting now, have you got customers lined up for those? Are they?
Actually, while some of your other speakers were talking, I did a double check on the orders for this week. So we have orders in from Hong Kong, Singapore, Abu Dhabi, Dubai, and India.
Okay, so that is good. That is good. And so that you've got customers lined up regardless of the global situation. Can you?
There are no shortage of customers for plantation teak.
No, good. There's a good demand for that. Can I ask, just going back a step, when you said about reclaiming some of the land, were you involved then in? Did you use only sort of traditional finance methods, or was this carbon finance or climate work?
No, we have the carbon absorption. We haven't used any carbon finance. We haven't used any grant aid. We haven't used any charity. We haven't used any national supporting mechanisms. This is a commercial business. It's an industry. It makes a profit. It's a highly viable industry. The problem we've got is you have a constant stream of aid agencies, NGOs, charities, talking about replanting, reforestation. All they're actually doing is confusing everybody, and they are stopping the major industrial finance houses coming into the industry because they all perceive it as a industry that needs support. It really doesn't.
And it sounds like your one is doing quite well if the orders are coming through.
Look, anything in plantation is a long-term business. It's an illiquid asset for a period of time. You have to think very carefully and understand very, very well what your business model is. You have to look at the term that you're going to have capital tied up. But yeah, absolutely. As we go forward, We look at climate change, we look at the demands, we look at the pressures. I mean, the flex is a massively important thing for us. The processing and support we get from Ghana as a nation is just incredible. The world has changed. The world's moving on. We've got to plant. There's now new legislation, which I've had a quick summary from Michael Rawlinson, but there's new rules being brought in now for large companies in the UK that are going to have to prove their carbon audits. It's changing. Gone are the days where timber had to be about concessions and about removing timber. There has to be an ongoing evolution. There has to be planting. There has to be growing. And at the end of the day, our byproducts for growing timber are carbon absorption, job creation in a developing nation, and timber that is taking the pressure off the natural forests. Yeah, I'm good with all of that.
Okay, no, well, thank you very much, Mark. And just picking up on a couple of the points you made then, if we turn to Michael Rawlinson, Mark just mentioned some of the points which you've raised with him about some of the policy drivers that you see coming from a slightly different angle to help give a boost to the the forestry and timber sector. Could you just mention a few of those and talk through some
yeah,
of those?
Certainly, David, and good afternoon, everybody. I hope you can all hear me. As you know, within the UK, the government has incorporated a lot of the international treaty obligations that are flying around between the nations into a domestic UK Act of Parliament, the Climate Change Act 2008, and has set itself the target of carbon neutrality by 2050. Initially, the strong emphasis was on reduction in carbon emissions. But increasingly, there is a feeling that the low-hanging fruit that was to be had, closing down coal-fired power stations, that sort of thing, has occurred. And what used to be considered to be almost cheating, that is relying upon offsetting in order to get to that carbon neutrality, is now seen to be an integral part of the overall plan, and increasingly so. And we've seen that particularly in respect of the aviation industry, which is now very open under CORSIA in saying that until technology leap forwards occur in the mid-2030s, we're going to have to do a lot of offsetting. And we've seen the instructions to government change from the Committee on Climate Change to allow that to happen. Of course, that means that for those who are in the market for selling their carbon offsetting, they've got to improve their game. They've got to make sure that the certifications are right, and they've got to show that additionality is clear to be found on a proper due diligence and audit trail. But what Mark was just referring to there, and very much chiming with his idea that this ought to be a self-sustaining market solution, is that as of 2 days ago, the government have set forward a timetable that by 2023, large companies and fund managers should, and by 2025 shall, set out within their annual filing returns how climate change is impacting upon their business. So for instance, insofar as they are at risk because they or the funds that they hold are not going to be too fleet of foot when it comes to carbon adaptation, or because they are high emitters. All of this has got to go into the returns. And the government have been absolutely clear in the signal that they've given in the document from 2 days ago, this was from the Treasury, the UK Treasury, that those companies that do have that sort of duty upon them to report and who do not report can expect the market to fly from them in terms of investment. And their offset becomes incredibly important as part of their mix and how they are going to comply with those duties of reporting. And of course, as we all know, the concomitant to growing trees is that you are a carbon sink. You cannot do one without the other. And so from 2023 to 2025, we can see that greater parts of the UK economy are going to fall into this regulated area, and they are going to have to turn to timber production, not just because it is a source of profit in itself, but because it is the creation of these carbon sinks. So we think medium term, the future is pretty bright, because where the UK is leading at the moment, certainly the EU will follow, and the US under Biden, as our colleague from Indonesia has just been saying, it will probably follow as well. So yeah, those were my thoughts.
And just to finish on that, does the business model of a timber producing forest, whether it's a plantation or a natural forest, is that business model acceptable for taking that finance for producing offsets? Will that work in the minds of those frameworks, those rules?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, as long as the certification is in place, and particularly with Ghana, because it's under the UK's wing in respect of FLEGT, because it is a close complier with Red and Red Plus. It's got a good reputation, and rightly so. But that's the regulatory side. The business side is even stronger. Where else in the market, apart from taking wild bets on the various equities available around the world, where else are you going to get returns of better than 1%, 2%, 3%, except for in timber, which is literally growing from the seed?
Yeah.
And I think one thing that Mark hasn't yet said, but if you give him half a chance, he will. The timescales where you plant in the way that we are planting in Ghana, which is tightly controlled and tightly spaced, is accelerating growth. It's like forcing rhubarb in South Yorkshire. It grows straight and tall and true. So we are getting timber of a size, again, he's the expert, not me on this, that you would expect from trees of at least double the age.
You're obviously heavily involved in the FLEGT and policy as well as trade analysis world. Do you think that these other, the carbon finance, the sort of the emphasis that we're seeing in so many other areas of the news, do you think this is going to have a positive impact on timber production and supply?
Yes, I think we've heard enough from the opportunities in the plantation sector. Yes, considerable opportunities there. I'm more involved on the demand side, and there is certainly quite a lot of issues still. There's actually quite a lot of lack of awareness often about some of the positive benefits that can be derived from sustainable forest management. I mean, one concern that I have is that there is obviously this huge focus on plantations, which is appropriate when you're re-establishing areas that were previously harvested or damaged a long time ago or several decades ago on land which is degraded. There is an issue still with is this finance going to be available for sustainable management of natural tropical forest, where there's still quite a lot of misunderstanding as to the contribution that can make towards carbon benefits in terms of ensuring that the land stays under forest, provides an income from sustainable production. There's still a lot of issues surrounding the actual standards that are being developed for demonstrating the carbon benefits of different products. And my impression is that the industry generally has not been sufficiently engaged in some of those standard setting processes for things like environmental product declarations, product environmental footprint standards that are being developed across the EU, and often certain aspects of using timber in construction, for example, do not get the recognition that they deserve. Things are changing. I think the design community, for example, is beginning to get on board and recognize the value of timber in construction, but there's still a lot of work to be done in certainly working with the standards community, with the EPD community, to make sure that timber gets appropriate recognition for its benefits in end use applications.
Okay, I'm gonna sort of wrap up now and ask each of you then. We've got these talks coming up. The UK is hosting them, and there's lots of policy work that we're involved with as TTF. on the tropical side and on, well, all timber policy and timber market sides. We also are certainly looking to be taking a presence within the COP talks in Glasgow. What would you, and I'm going to ask, I'll start with Mark, who has just dropped off this screen, but I think he's there. I'll start with Mark Hogg. What would you like to see the trade saying, or the trade representatives, or the timber industry representatives saying at that meeting? And what would you like to see us advocating for?
Wow, it's a massive question, and I mean, would take a little bit longer than a couple of minutes, but I think the key areas are, we need to see plantations, forestry for what they are. So I understand there are problems, I understand there are difficulties, but we need to see them as a supporter of the natural forests. We need to see them as a generator of timber. We're not going to stop using timber as a nation or as a global economy, but we need to keep sustaining and renewing and bringing in more timber. I think I'd like to see the plantation industry certainly stop being seen as a charity case and being seen as a viable, genuine business. Then we can start to talk to the big banks, the institutions, the major funds about them coming in and seeing this as a viable thing to do, as opposed to something governments are telling you you have to do. That is the biggest possible step that we could take in the next 5 to 10 years that I think would really impact on climate change.
Okay.
I had a conversation this morning on site at Afram Headwaters, and we had a great conversation. The byproduct is we grow trees, we absorb carbon, we create jobs. Where's the downside?
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much, Mark. I'm going to ask, I'm actually going to come across to Budi as well, if you are still there, Budi Hermawan in Indonesia.
Yes.
We spoke recently at the Indonesian Forum about what some of the producer countries may like to see. What is, if there was a message you're going to put across at the climate change talks on behalf of the timber industry, what would you like to be saying? Well, or would you like somebody to be saying?
Well, in terms of climate change, I mean, you know, we all timber traders, timber industry, we want to be responsible for what we produce, and so we hope that the world is, I guess, kind of doing the same thing what we want. Like, for example, if we are, let's say, that's why, let's say for FLEGT into the EU and UK, we hope that EU and UK should communicate more and even try to get more members, so that everybody is trying to do the same competitiveness. So, for example, you raised earlier about you know, an observation on Rupert's presentation on China's reducing an export, but Vietnam is kind of like you know, the other way. So it's kind of like suspicious, and that's why the US is also doing just open an investigation in October, because we also experienced firsthand on that, because during the US doing giving high tariffs on China's product for especially the kitchen cabinet industry into the US, it was a big ready to assemble kitchen industry. So suddenly overnight, China industry just shut down, and we see a lot of Chinese investors try to find in Southeast Asia, including Indonesia. We met with several of them. They're all big players with big volume, and we were offered by one of them to do transshipment, which we politely declined. But it is happening in this world, and for us in Indonesia, we are already committed with FLEGT, and we don't want to go back, because actually FLEGT actually helps us, you know, with the world having their own, I would say, certain legality issues, legality requirements. So we want the ease of business. We want to do it good. We want to produce good wood and sustainably, but we also want to provide our customer with ease of business. So we do hope that the importing countries keep focusing on wanting to import legal wood, sustainable wood, so that I think in the end it will solve the climate change issues when everybody is responsible.
And just on that, you mentioned tariffs. What about the, Rupert was saying about the progress for countries around the world? Would it act as an incentive for those countries who've signed VPA agreements? Would it act as an incentive for them to get to the flag licensing if they thought there was 0% tariffs globally on flag licensed goods?
Well, at the end of the day, Rupert mentioned about flag fee is not the only, actually not the main determining factor. It does help ease a business, but there are other cost issues and others. So if there is an incentive for zero tariff, definitely some saving. I'm sure, I'm pretty sure that a lot of countries will jump in, but
yeah,
they kind of see like, okay, Indonesia, okay, you're already flag fee, so what do you get? My product still can go to EU in a mass scale. So
there needs to be some other benefite.
Exactly.
Thank you, Buddy. I'm going to come over because we're coming up to time. Mike, if there was something that the industry was going to be saying, or some messages on behalf of the industry at COP26, what sort of things would you like like people to be hearing or like people to be saying?
Very simple message from me. You can't grow trees without sequestering carbon, and provided there is proper certification that it's clean development, provided you can prove additionality, it is not cheating to use carbon offsetting and to use that as an excuse or justification for growing trees, as well as the inherent profit, as part of a mixed package for achieving net neutrality.